There's an insane XP farm, and yes, you can do it solo. The amount of mobs in this area are staggering, and they're mostly elites. I'll also have some tips for both non-Sorc and Sorcerer players. What's the word? So we're back into the video to check out all things Diablo 4. Okay, so let's just get onto this XP farm. Now this is a dungeon that's located in Mongon's Works, and it's in the bottom half area of the map. You'll see it here showcased all throughout. Now the main thing with this dungeon is just finding these elites in there, and sometimes they're really close and sometimes they're far away. And there can also be another thing that's with that as well. But again, yes, you can do this solo. It is pretty easily achievable solo. It's mainly just with a lot of kiting and a lot of door trapping. But the XP is comparable, I think, to most groups. It's around 180,000 per run, and they usually only take between 4 to 5 minutes per run. For the first pack, it's about 90,000 XP for about 3 minutes of your time, but it's all depending on how much damage you can output and your survivability. So first up, as you head into this dungeon, you're just going to try to locate this first group pack of elites. Once you come across them, the best way to probably initiate that is just either grab them from a range area or quickly grab them and try to make your way to a doorway or to a corner piece. Now if you're a sorcerer, what you can also do is teleport through the group to the other side. And this usually why I do this is because there's not a lot of mobs on the other side of these elites where there is mobs behind you. Sometimes those mobs can be a bit distracting, so you can take them out, but sometimes I like to just leave them and teleport through the entire group, and there's usually a doorway as well on the other side. Now they can also be in open areas, and the open area ones I just suggest kiting in a circle, and sometimes those are actually better, as you'll still be with the group and you won't have to kite as far back. Now after you grab the group of mobs, you are going to want to kite back and try to bring them either through a doorway or try to have them at a certain angle. And there's several angles where they can barely shoot anything at you or get anything to you. Sometimes they'll even get trapped by a door, and I've seen that as well. However, none of that is needed. You don't need to trap them, and you might even be able to take them all out at once. However, my sorcerer is a little too squishy and my bubble barrier just doesn't provide enough time, which again, you do not need. You don't need any legendaries for this. You don't need anything crazy. I don't even use my bubble barrier half the time. I'm just kiting mostly. If I had like a higher second bubble barrier, that little legendary, you probably can actually take them all out at once. However, mine currently doesn't have that, and again, none of the legendaries that I have are really providing any bonuses that will make this more so that easy. But as you're kiting these mobs around, they will tend to reset, but you almost kind of want that. Especially if you're struggling, you can kind of get several to reset. So what you do is you grab the mobs, pull them through one of the doorways or a side angle, and kind of just keep kiting them back. Eventually that back half will reset, and you'll just have about 4 or 5 elites in front of you. And then these are pretty easy to take down, normally for anybody. Also, do not be afraid to spam your potions. Each of these elites is going to drop up to 1 to probably even 3 potions, I think. But you'll definitely get 1 from almost each of them. And so even if you're down to 0 potions, you'll still get probably a full inventory back of potions again. And you definitely will after you finish off the first elite pack. Now there is sometimes a second elite pack within the dungeon. This one might be a little bit farther and harder to find. Sometimes they're around corners or the other side of the dungeon. And I'm just not too sure if it's valuable just to skip that second pack for now if you don't have it by yourself, but I usually do try to find them. And again, that pack is probably worth between 90,000 depending on how the scaling XP happens with your level, but with around between 53 to 55, that's what I found the XP to be. Now I would also try to get the max amount of potions that you can. There is also gear that can drop that can give you even more potions that I've seen, up to 3 and maybe even higher, but I still would try to recommend getting as many as you can, and I of course have 9 of 9, although typically I have around 3 left. And again, do not be afraid to spam constantly these potions. You are probably going to be using them like crazy, and even if your health hits half, you're going to want to be spamming it, because a lot of these mobs can instantly one-shot you just with one of their attacks, or even take 90% off your health. Again, I am playing sorcerer, so my class is a little bit more squishy overall. If you are playing sorcerer, you might be a little bit more squishy. And again, if you do need any build tips, I have a mostly full build guide already up on my channel, and I'll have that link down in the description down below if you want to check that build guide out for sorcerer, and that is the build that I'm using for this currently. But if you're playing any other spec, I'm sure you're able to do this farm just fine. And the amount of gear drops, I've even gotten sacred amulets from this, so this is a really good farm. And even solo, it's about an hour per level, and I also noticed that when Rax was farming, they're doing about an hour per level. Granted, they're between level 75 and 80 right now, and a lot of those guys are doing split runs in groups, but this is the solo farm for you guys so that you can do it as a solo player. Now you should really watch out for mobs with shivering, as they're gonna slow you down quite a bit, and when you get slowed here, it's really gonna hurt your pathing and all that stuff. I also would recommend trying to get some boots with at least +1 or +2 to your dodges, because those really do help me out a lot. They've been able to get me out of a lot of like tricky scenarios with that in general. But you might be asking, how do we reset the dungeon? How are we getting the dungeons to constantly reset if we're not in a group? Because there is that group method of where you can invite somebody to a different group. After leaving one, then the dungeon will reset. Or after 1 minute of length, then the dungeon will reset after that point. However, there's another way to reset the dungeon, and this is by leaving the dungeon first. You don't want to teleport to a city or do this beforehand. So leave the dungeon first, and you can do so by hitting it on your radius wheel. So kind of opening that emote wheel, there's a little leave dungeon option. You can also do it through your map, but I find the radio wheel to be easiest. So once you leave the dungeon, you'll be outside. At that point, you can then leave the game or go back to town if you need to sell and repair. Once you leave the game, it'll send you back to the main menu screen. Once you're back at the main menu screen, you can then re-log back in and the dungeon should be reset. Also, as of doing the audio for this video, we did actually have a patch that came out, but there's nothing in there about the dungeon being nerfed or any of that. So there still are the mob spawns, there's still hyper spawning in there, and these little groups of elites, or I should say these huge group of elites that are spawning in the same kind of congregated area. Now I should also have a video out sometime today with the patch notes and a bunch of other things that are changing and happening in the game, so also be sure to check out that video as well. And really only Barb is the one that got major nerfs, and I think Necro got a little bit of buffs for their minions. I still think Whirlwind Bill will be viable for this, and as long as you have the sustainability there, you should be fine. If you have any other questions or know of any other solo farms, please post them down below so others can find that out. I also do want to credit Rax, as this is the stream that I saw this farm from. However, they were in a group, and so I didn't know if it was going to be viable as a solo, but then I tried it and it seemed like it was able to be doable. And yeah, the XP seems pretty good so far, especially that 90k for the 1-pack and 180k for the 2-packs. Again, they were doing about a level per hour, and that was with a 4-man farm, and I was also doing about a level per hour. Granted, this is at level 50, and they are at level 70, but I think it still will apply in this case. So if you have any other build ideas for any of the other classes that aren't sorceress, because I know people are going to be like, oh, well, you're a sorceress, that's why you're able to do this. Which, no, I'm pretty sure every other class can be able to do this. It can be decently a difficult solo farm, however, I still think with the right build, with the right CC control, and just kiting what you can take. If you can only take 3 elites at a time, kite them back. It's still a mass amount of elites here, and you're really not going to get this much congestion in any other area. I just don't think any other farm is viable unless you're farming for rep and renown. But that should about cover it for today's video, and if you like it, and subscribe. Until the next one. Deuces.